because it is dangerous. It's a dangerous, dangerous job. You never know when the next call, somebody's going to get hurt or maybe their last one.
LA wildfires, devastating, deadly. Firefighters, unsung heroes. Maybe an expert can help us with perspective. Gary Warren is a 21-year veteran of the Columbia, Missouri Fire Department, holding the ranks of firefighter, engineer, lieutenant, and battalion chief. He's also my brother-in-law. Today he discusses PTSD, how he was drawn into the field following his dad, and the dangers of split-second fire decision-making. Can you talk to me about the decision that's made in the moment in terms of preserving a structure versus looking out for the structures that are right next to it? Is there a certain point where you're looking at something burning and you're saying, okay, this can't be salvaged, but how do I stop what's going on around it?
It happens a lot, and it's weird because this is an instance where you have that crossover between the natural cover of the wildland firefighting and it goes into the commercial or residential structure firefighting tactics. And so for us, everything is about what we call an exposure. And so an exposure is when you have, say, the house on fire next to you, your house becomes the exposure. And so what we take a look at is there a rescue that needs to be effected? If the answer is yes, then we have to make a split second decision on if that is a viable rescue or if realistically we are talking about a recovery. And in which case, a recovery doesn't involve aggressive firefighting tactics. So wildland firefighting is really kind of a defensive posture where you're trying to stop the fire from growing by either creating fire breaks or burning back fuel towards the direction of the fire so that the fuel, the natural cover, the trees, the limbs, the dry brush have burned up when it gets to that area. The problem, and this is where you get into the crossover, is the high winds, the ember, and then of course radiation, which radiation is just heat waves. That's a fancy way of saying that something burns so hot that the air that radiates through causes the exposed fuel, which could be a house or other trees, to catch fire and then eventually burn. And that's why this thing has grown so quickly, because you have all of these perfectly bad things in place. High wind. You guys were dealing with a little bit of drought. If I'm not mistaken, the fires last year weren't really bad. So you've got a lot more fuel. And then the embers, it's kind of like one of those old countdown to disaster videos that we used to watch in the fire service, where you start to see all of these things that kind of line up. And then, of course, the construction. We talked a little bit about that earlier, where people who are a little bit more blessed, if you will, can build their houses probably in areas that aren't the best in terms of natural cover fires and firefighting. And one of the things that is quickly becoming an issue, and again, it highlights the difference between natural cover fires and residential firefighter or structural firefighting, is water supply. If you go and you look down your street, per national standards, about every 700 feet, you're going to see a fire hydrant. And depending on the neighborhood you live in, if there's commercial property there, it'll have a different color. And for each city and county, colors represent different things: red, orange, green, blue. And that refers to red is the lowest, up to 500 gallons of water per minute. You have the one thing that you need as an asset. It is controllable and it can be boosted by the water plant. Now you take a vast area with vegetation, homes, with hillside, with all of these different circumstances, but you don't have a water supply. So water has to come in from elsewhere. Sometimes it gets close enough to neighborhoods where you can attach to a hydrant. I believe I saw a lot of people that were disenchanted because they didn't understand why ocean water couldn't be used. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because water is a thing that inhibits the chemical chain reaction, which is fire. So by doing that, it eliminates the heat. And so If it's not hot enough for the fuel to burn, there's no fire. And so, yes, ocean water will work. However, salt water is horrible for the equipment, the gaskets, the hoses. They don't match. And so we look at all of those things, and they're all factors.
You pointed out the importance of the evacuation because you talked about the process and how to fight the fire and how to mitigate damage to additional structures. So I'm assuming that just by virtue of not having to worry about people there because hopefully they followed the orders to evacuate, that lets you focus more on, hey, what can I do best in this situation?
Absolutely, because then the decision becomes more about firefighting strategy. With structural firefighting, we look at room level house. And what that means is we want to try to limit a fire to the room. And if we can do that, great. If we can't, if it breaches the room, then we want to limit it to that level or part of that level. And if we can't, then we want to limit it to the house so that the exposures, the things around it, don't become part of the incident as well. And those are easy decisions for us because if we want to get scientific, there's structural firefighting formulas that say we have a hydrant, we can get this many gallons per minute, we have this much approximate involvement of fire in the structure, and then we do things such as read the smoke. Is the smoke gray? Is it black? Is it puffing? If it's puffing, the house is about to flash, it's really hot. We don't want to send anybody in there because we're going to get people hurt. We're going to try to put a hole in the roof like a chimney, let it out, and then limit it to part of the house. Those things become really cut and dry for us, so long as we don't hear the dreadful, I think grandma's in there. I
Right.
think somebody's in that house. And it's really kind of a nightmare scenario. And it can happen to you anytime, anywhere. And that's part of that PTSD. I can remember like yesterday, we had a call in the early AM hours before the end of our shift. I was a lieutenant and I had a female firefighter. Her name was Brenda. And then our engineer was Tim. And we responded to something that seemed very simple. It was a vehicle fire threatening a structure, which means you want to get there, limit it to the vehicle, not let it burn into the structure. And so while we're trying to pop the hood of the engine compartment, once the cable burns, you have to pry the hood open, which is kind of difficult. And so while I'm trying to pry the hood open and my firefighter Brenda has the hose, somebody steps out on the balcony and says, "Hey, I think the guy that owns that car is inside," which was really difficult for me because when I broke the window out and opened the door, I put my hand in the front seat, the driver's side, didn't feel or see anything. Well, he was laid down in the passenger side with the seat all the way down. And
Mm.
so this was it involved vehicle fire. It was burning really violently. And so when we got to him, I pulled him out of the car, started to do CPR on him immediately, called for additional help. I mean, this guy's just burnt up. He is in bad shape. And no, I take that back. That was difficult. This particular one, I actually thought that the gentleman was dead. I thought he was dead. He was sitting in the vehicle with his mouth open, his eyes fixed, and his head leaning back. And so while I'm waiting on my additional help to get there, and I called the police department to make sure there was nothing nefarious, he takes a breath. And that's when all the work started. We had to kind of stop what we were doing and start tending to him. And I still didn't think that gentleman was going to live. And he did,
Oh, wow.
But it's an example of how when you start down one road and you would think the job is very concrete, how quickly it changes when you involve trying to rescue someone.
Right.
And a vehicle fire, for example, is going to be a one company response. And a company can be in larger cities that might be 4 to 6 people. In Columbia, that's 3 of us. That's me, my firefighter, and my engineer. And so that wasn't unusual. We handle those type of deals all the time. But when you talk about going into a rescue mode while this fire is still going on, now I have to call for two additional trucks because now I need a water supply. Now I need additional help in dealing with the medical side of this. Oh, and we're waiting for the ambulance to get there that's coming from farther away than what we are. So that's just a small example of how quickly your mode can change when you involve a rescue. And that's why I harped so much on following those evacuation instructions because, like you said, it eliminates the need for having to worry about people and just dealing with mitigating the incident, which is bad enough as it is.
Man, well, I appreciate you, sir.
You're welcome, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. It was nice to dust off some of the old stuff that I used to do. Because these type of settings to me were so much more informative than a slow news day where where they were like, well, we don't have anything. Hey, let's find out who the PIO is and let's do an interview on changing batteries in the smoke detectors. Like, come on, man.
Is there any part of you that misses it?
Yeah, yeah. Yes and no. I mean, that's such a complex answer. I'm so blessed to know that I made a difference in so many lives. You know, when I when I developed the chief officer training program, I did it because I was overwhelmed one day and I was trying to do a whole lot of work and I wasn't being very successful. And I made a mistake on the daily roster. And being how firefighters are, they all started calling and giving me crap and me being an Aries and me being petty. Is I said, well, I tell you what, the next time that we have a surplus of personnel, you're gonna come down and you're gonna be my buggy boy for the day. You're gonna drive me around. You're gonna do everything that I would do, everything that I would do. And if we catch an incident, you are going to be in command. I'm going to be sitting right next to you. And from that, I developed a manual, a few hundred pages, every aspect of it. Why I'm so proud of that is all of the guys that went through it are all chief officers.
Oh, wow.
All my guys. They're either captains or chief officers. So when you look at the chief officers on all three ships, they all came from me.
Beautiful.
And it was yeah, I was very fortunate. And so that part, yeah, I miss the teaching part. Um, but at the same time, one of the reasons why I decided to retire, one of the last fires that I commanded, it was Columbia Square Apartments. And this is part of that PTSD. You carry this stuff with you. You can't erase it. It's like permanently seared in your brain. But we had a call, and there it was row apartments, which kind of had a propensity to really take off if you didn't catch fires and put them out quickly, because the fire stops had no brakes. So if a fire breached a wall, it could go up, over, and I sent a crew in. And you remember when I talked to you earlier about reading smoke? Well, puffing black smoke is a bad signal for us. Flashover kills firefighters, and we know that. So we try to get
Because that specifically means what? The puffy black smoke.
that there's a flashover potential. And
Okay.
a flashover is where you have this buildup of heat inside of a structure, and everything, all of the contents in that room reaches the flammable point
Mm,
where combustion can be sustained. And it happens all at once. So it's really, for lack of better words, like a miniature explosion where everything catches on fire, everything in that room. And so when we see that puffing black smoke, we know that horizontal entry will be the thing that introduces air, which is what this fire is begging for. It's craving for. It's starving itself
mm,
out. And when it gets that air, then you have a flashover,
I
and
see.
everybody and everything in that room is gone. So the way we manipulate that is by putting a hole vertically above it, because the pressure inside is greater than the pressure outside. The hot air, smoke releases through the top. We can make entry vertically and extinguish the fire. Well, I had sent a crew in right as this phenomenon was about to happen. And I saw, like, the instant that it was about to flash. And that was when the crew got water on. And I just remember the officer, his name was Jan McCrary. He was a captain. He comes to my vehicle and he goes, "Man, Chief, that was a hot one." And I was looking at if you look, these are called Bork shields on the back of the helmet. They're little eyelids that flap down. His were melted down like
Mm.
eyelashes.
Oh, wow.
And that terrified me. So that part I don't miss because, the biggest fear that I had ever had wasn't the things that I went through, because Lord knows if I'm a cat, I used 8 lives. It was putting other men and women in harm's way and not being able to do anything other than make commands from a vehicle. That was kind of hard for me. And we had a guy that was a good friend of mine. His name was Bruce Britt. He was a captain, and he passed away. And it wasn't a fire, but I would have been on shift that day,
Mm.
but I traded my day away. And he had a porch that he was walking on collapse and then fell on top of him and crushed him.
Mm.
So those are the type of things, because it is dangerous. It's a dangerous, dangerous job.
Mm.
And you never know when the next call, somebody's going to get hurt or maybe their last one. And so that part of it, I wouldn't want to put your sister through it. And, it's kind of like that compassion fatigue that she talked about. A lot of times that compassion fatigue is related to an incident, but it can be related to a career
Mm.
also.
Who looks out for firefighters who might quietly be struggling?
Sometimes it has to be the person who works with them, say, "Hey, Chief Warren just had this call. It was pretty rough. I know he might not say anything, but maybe we should have somebody from EAP give him a call." And that was something that I was tasked with. It was something that I revived at our fire department, but as a shift commander, it was something that I was tasked with as a person charged with being responsible for these other men and women, because I have to acknowledge when they're going through something, whether or not they feel like they need help. And we've got to find the right way to get them what they need. You can't force it on them. And so that compassion fatigue, it's real.
Mhm.
And if you think about it outside of the fancy name that we've now acknowledged and given it, it's there and you can see it. You might not know what to call it, but you can see it. And so we rely on colleagues to tell us, "Hey, you need to go talk to somebody." We
Right.
rely on family members to say, "Hey, Terrence doesn't seem right. I know, he just got through working like 72 hours straight fighting fire. And, I know he's tired, but something seems off."
How can we help firefighters and all the people devastated?
If you are a proactive church member, then you can be a proactive supporter
Amen.
where people need it. The fires don't have to be in your community. I'm certain that there are churches in the areas where the fires are active that could use the help, just like the response to California has become state and federal response. You need that same all hands on deck approach with the people to provide those support services. And those organizations deal with a little bit of compassion fatigue themselves as well, because you only have so many workers. And, for the firefighters, it may be a few hours of rest and getting a meal. But you think about those people who are doing that supportive function, they're not getting a break. So those people need help too. So if you are a Rotarian, you are part of a Rotary Club, get down there, help. If you're a Mason, get down there, help. If you are part of the American Red Cross and you're looking for a way to help, don't cowboy it. Don't try to come up with something on your own. There are ways to help people, and you can do it through your church. You can do it through other organizations that provide assistance. Don't forget about the loved ones and the spouses, because they need the support also.
Can we switch gears, brother in law? Can you share with the people a bit of your history? I know your dad served for a long time. Tell a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. For me, growing up, there was only two things that I wanted to do. And I knew that from a very early age. My father was a firefighter, and we both loved football. So growing up, I wanted to play football,
You
and I
don't
wanted to
like
be
the
a
Kansas City
firefighter.
Chiefs, do you?
Oh, that's my favorite team. Missouri, my home state. So, well, go Chiefs. But no, I was fortunate enough to be able to do both. I had a front row seat to a lot of the glass ceilings that my father broke in being only the third Black man ever hired by the Columbia Fire Department. He was the first line officer. He was the first chief officer. He was our first deputy chief. And then when he retired, he relocated to Austin, Texas, and he was the executive director of the Texas Commission on Fire Protection. So I had a wonderful resource in my career as far as what things to avoid and some of the hurdles that I would have to overcome myself because I was the first, second generation Black firefighter. And, probably if I had to pinpoint the greatest moment of my career, it was as a young child watching my father get the resources to build our first training academy and being so proud of him sitting in his office. And then to fast forward, decades later, the first day that I became a battalion chief and I was the chief of training, I sat in that same office
Wow.
at his same old desk. And so that is, that's probably the greatest moment of my career. So I've been very fortunate, very fortunate.
I can only imagine the pride you must have felt.
Yeah,
Wow.
I still do to this day. For a firefighter at the end of your career, regardless of how long or short, because some people don't make it to retirement. Their body breaks down or they physically or mentally can't handle the rigors of the job. But at the end of it all, you just want to be able to look into a mirror. And this is what I told all of the men and women that I took through recruit school and that I supervised at the shift commander level. You want to be able to look into that mirror and be okay with the person looking back at you. And so how do you reconcile that person looking back at you? And that's never taking shortcuts, always doing the best you can. Very small thing, leave work problems at work and leave home problems at home. Don't mix the two. Those are the things that will help you in your career. And then finding the people that you can talk to as an outlet. And that's part of that peer counseling network that you build. It's both informal and formal.
That's really good, brother. I appreciate that. All right, bro. I've kept you going for an hour and a half. I appreciate your time, man.
All good.
I know
Anytime.
that they were blessed to have you in that
I,
department.
it was reciprocal. I grew up there. I became a man there. So I learned a lot about myself and I became a better person from my experiences.
Awesome. Appreciate you, man.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate
Absolutely. You have a good one.
You too, brother. Take care.
You too.
Bye.